Welcome to Top City Today. I'm here with Lucas Ryan. He's running for City Council, District 6. Welcome, Lucas.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we're here and we're going to discuss why you want to run for City Council, what are important to you, and what you think that the City of Topeka and all of our citizens should know. So first, let me ask you to introduce yourself. What do people need to know about you?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Lucas Ryan. I grew up here in Topeka. I went to Topeka High, Robinson, Williams, grew up in the 501 school district, right across the street from Washburn, actually. My wife and I met in the school system, and we went off to Kansas City for a little while because we had been caught up in that narrative that's so present in our schools that Topeka isn't a place to build your life. And while we were away in Kansas City, we realized how much of a lie that narrative really is. So we came back to Topeka, we bought our house over on the edge of Collins Park where we live now, and really started digging into the city that we had grown up in and finding as many ways as we could to serve. And over the last 2 years, I think we've been pretty successful in that, and it's time to take it to that next step and serve on the City Council if you'll let me.
Thank you. So you told us a little bit about having to move out to Topeka, coming back. So tell me, was there something in particular that drove you to run for office?
I served on the Strengthening Police and Community Partnerships Council. For those who don't know, it was a Department of Justice facilitated program that the Topeka Police Department and the community underwent together to help heal some of the divide that was exposed after the Dominique White incident. And through that process, I saw how much more work there was to be done in Topeka around shifting our mindset towards fixing problems instead of just treating symptoms. Because one of the things that we really like to do is symptom-based treatment. We'll use policy or other methods of fixing things to go out and try to make the economy look nicer, but we don't fix any of the problems that actually create those situations. And so at the end of the day, we have to fix the problem later, and it costs more money and it causes more problems, and we have more symptoms that we're treating, and we still have to go fix that original problem. And the real impetus for me getting involved in this race was seeing how many problems there are that we can go fix at their more root causes and save the taxpayers money, create better lives, and really build a foundation for this city to move into the next 2 decades in a healthier, much more financially responsible way.
All right. So you talked about issues, finding solutions. So what do you think are the top 3 issues facing Topeka right now?
So one of the biggest issues that we have is that narrative that I talked about and that self-image issue. Because Topeka has this idea that we can't fix it. And we have to fix that issue first, because if we don't fix that mentality, if we don't start attracting young talent and retaining the talent that we have, then our economy is going to be in a very bad situation. When we have opening jobs, as our population continues to retire and age out, and we don't have talent to replace them, then we're going to have an empty workforce, plenty of jobs, but nobody to put there. Our tax base decreases, and we no longer have the revenue. So one of those first issues is this idea that we can't fix it. We need to fix that mentality. The second huge issue that we need to fix is our emphasis on sustainability and infrastructure. We're really bad about going out and patching potholes or replacing roads without looking at any of the current research out there around asphalt aggregates or other shifts that we could be making to make our infrastructure more sustainable. So in 10 and 15 years, we don't have to do the exact same thing we're doing right now and just spend more because material costs are going to go up over the next decade. That's just how inflation works. And the last issue that I see as being fundamental to fixing issues in Topeka is fixing the economic slant in this city. Right now, you have an economic slant towards the western end of the city, and specifically the southwest, whereas the north and eastern portions of the city, and even parts of the south, if you're going south on Topeka Boulevard towards Montera, are neglected. And our economic development incentives are not being used to help fix that. Because of that, we see high poverty rates. We see lower educational attainment because of the way that our school systems are funded based off property values. We see high blight areas. We see companies not moving into those locations. And the current city council has approved 3 tax increment financing districts, all of them west of Lane Avenue. That's not pragmatic, that's not good due diligence of taxpayers' money, and all it does is create more of a slanted economy that creates these other issues in the city. We see crime rates are related to poverty when we look at the research. We see that infrastructure and expansion of youth are all related to the way that our economy is set up. And when Topeka says that only 1/4 of the city matters and the rest of it can figure it out themselves, we have problems. So we need to fix the economic slant in this city.
We talked about the need to change Topeka's image. What tools are you plan to use to make that change?
One of the biggest things that I think needs to be done around the image of Topeka is getting that mentality, getting that narrative that Topeka is in a place for our youth to grow up where it's starting, which is in our schools. I want to go individually to each middle school and high school in town, in all of the outlying districts and 501, and talk directly to those students. One of the advantages I have is I can look them in the face and say, 8 years ago, I was sitting in that auditorium. And I also sat there and thought that, you know, most of my teachers live in Lawrence. All my friends go out to Lawrence to have good times. There's nothing in Topeka. And that's not true. And this is why. And I can stand up there and show them a real world example of how not too long ago I left and came back. And because of that coming back, there's something here and we see it and we can talk about that. But if we're not talking about it with our kids where it matters most, then that mentality is never going to change. And so the fundamental way to fix that, I believe, is going directly into our schools and going out and having community events and focusing on youth heavily, because they're the ones that are going to grow up and go to college and come back with their degree to fill these aged out positions. They're going to go to technical school and they're going to come back and they're going to be able to weld, or they're going to be our electricians and they're going to build the foundations of Topeka, or they're going to go straight into the workforce, which is just as valuable, but this is what's creating the Topeka economy. And when we hop on Facebook and see half a dozen teenagers posting about how they can't wait to get out of Topeka, we're going to have problems. And fixing that mentality by going directly into the schools is going to be the most effective way to do it.
You mentioned earlier that sustainability was part of your ideas about issues facing Topeka. That plays a role in Topeka's image. Is that what you're going for?
Yeah. A large portion of Topeka's salaries, over $30,000 a year, live in Lawrence and outlying communities. They don't actually live in Topeka. And part of the problem with that is that a lot of that salary is just going into these other communities. It's funding Lawrence's nightlife. It's funding these other communities' quality of life and entertainment areas. Sustainability is this idea that we're going to be able to be self-funding. So as we're developing downtown, as we're developing Noto and getting this nice, robust arts district going, we have to have the ability to be self-sustaining. Otherwise, it's not going to work out. Fixing Topeka's mentality as a place to live is something that helps create the draw for those salaried positions to come back and live inside Topeka. Then they're able to go out and they're able to go to the new movie theater that's being put in and see a movie for an affordable rate and have a wonderful experience. They're able to go downtown and experience a festival. They're able to go out into Topeka and really engage with that life. And so sustainability relates to it in the way that it becomes that more self-sufficient economy, instead of us continuing to just leech our money into surrounding areas.
A lot of your platform does seem to be connected, and I noticed that earlier you talked about an economic slant. So your proposition is saying that a number of these individuals, since their salaries are maybe not as high as Topeka would like them, that in order to fix that problem, to draw people in, we've got to bring these salaried people back. Is that what you're?
The conversation around the economic slant doesn't focus as much on just not retaining the salaries. That's more of commuter traffic and the overall Topeka economy. That's sales tax revenue that we could be capturing. That's property tax valuations increasing as people move into the community and buy houses. That's affordable housing increasing as we see new construction come into the area. And as new construction comes in, we see across the board affordable housing is research supported as being increased. The economic slant argument is much more looking at the overall health of the economy. So the salaried positions refers to the size and the amount of activity. The slant is more the health and how that's distributed throughout. A lot of those people who are living in these other communities wouldn't be living on the east side of Topeka anyway, partially because of that narrative and partially because of that economic slant. It creates the conditions that have built this narrative that Topeka isn't a safe place and that it's not a place where you want to live. And it's a flawed narrative and it's not true, but bringing that message to the table sometimes creates negative reactions. You just have to look at any of the Facebook scanner pages to know that. That conversation, though, is really how do we fix the distribution and make it a healthier economy? And then the other is how do we make it so that that economy, while it's healthy, can be self-sufficient and continue for the next decade, 2 decades, 5 decades, instead of being very healthy for 10 years and then just breaking again. Because none of the development that's happening on the west side is going to last if we don't fix that economic slant. We could bring in everybody we want who lives in Lawrence and works in Topeka and put them out near Clarion Woods, and it does not matter because that's only going to shift the city that way, and the east side, the north side, downtown are just going to continue to suffer unless we fix some of the slant in town.
Most of your issues really are focusing on like root causes. So a number of citizens in Topeka had mentioned that, among other things, that the police force is, not having as many people staffing it. They're mentioning that downtown, that there's venues in downtown that just haven't been filled in years. And so, do you have any direct action that you're planning on those two issues?
So when it comes to the police force, there's this narrative out there right now that they're understaffed. One of the things that we talked about on the Strengthening Police and Community Partnerships program, we actually talked about the staffing requests of the police force and how much they were getting. And the chief said that he was pretty comfortable with where they were at in terms of their potential recruits and where the current classes in the academy were. The staffing issue itself of the police department isn't something that we need to be concerned about as much, because the underlying issues with the police department are more focused on their community engagement and building that trust. One of the things that I'm looking at trying to figure out a better solution to is call response time. That's something that people frequently cite as an issue, and that relates back to the staffing narrative, because if we don't have enough officers, then calls are going to take a little bit longer. The issue that we're seeing right now is a lot of lower priority calls are coming in, and then something higher priority will come in and it'll bump the lower priority call. And then another high priority will come in and it'll bump the low priority call. And creating transparency in that system where you can track the priority of your call, where you're at in the queue, and developing more communication about when an estimated response time is and the changes that are happening, that's something that I'm looking at fixing, because that helps build that trust and create that transparency. If the chief does feel like we do need to increase staffing, which is something that I don't believe he currently thinks, based on the conversations around the Strengthening Police Community Partnerships program, but that might have changed. If that's an issue, then that's something I'd be open to talking with him about in terms of where they think that we need to be increasing recruitment strategies. As far as downtown properties, one of the things that I'm exploring, I'm not 100% committed to it, I still need to do some more research, I've already been knee-deep in it, is looking at maybe tweaking the way that we do property valuations downtown instead of passing a TIF district. A TIF district is wonderful to create new development and redevelop buildings. It's not great about changing commercial rent rates. And speaking from firsthand experience, I was involved in the top tank competition downtown. We were pricing rents for downtown locations, and the rent on Kansas Avenue is incredibly higher than if you walk a couple blocks off of Kansas to Van Buren. We were actually looking at one property that was 1,600 square feet for $2,700 a month, and you invert those numbers if you go off to Van Buren, where it was 2,700 square feet for $1,600 a month. Those prices are really hard for a brand new business to justify without an established foot traffic market. You can actually find comparable prices and rent to other cities in the Midwest that have developed downtown markets. And if you're a young business that's trying to assess which risks to take, if you can get that rent price in an established market, or that rent priced in an unestablished market, you're going to take the established market every single time because you have more of a guarantee that you're going to have business. So fixing the valuations can help incentivize dropping rents and creating a more prosperous economy down there organically instead of just changing the building so now that we have a reason to be like, look, rent's so high because the building's pretty. Let's actually get businesses in there, and then we can talk in 5 years and maybe we tweak it in 2 years or we tweak it in 4 years. But a TIF is inflexible policy. It's a 20-year contract. We don't get to change it.
With TIF districts, explain to our viewers what that is.
So TIF districts, TIF is the acronym for tax increment financing. And to simplify it a little bit, because tax policy gets complicated, TIF districts say there's this base threshold for property tax, and we're only going to collect that much and use it for the general fund. Everything in excess of that gets credited back as rebates to the developer for their infrastructure and development costs. So if a developer goes in and reworks, part of the water utility system, then they can get a rebate for that out of that property tax fund in that area. It's a way to help offset some of those development costs. There are a couple other things you can tweak it depending on the program itself and the plan itself. Each one is kind of unique and individualized. There are currently 3 active TIF districts in town. One of them is the College Hill development at 17th and Washburn. One of them is the 29th and Fairlawn development with Wheatfield. And one of them is at 29th and Wanamaker in the Villa West. You will notice that only one of those developments is actually finished and active. The 29th and Wanamaker development was just approved. We have no data on it. No development has happened. And 29th and Fairlawn is just finishing up construction. So we don't have a lot of empirical evidence for how TIFs can go well. And while there are some in this city, including those who were involved with the development and those who weren't, who call College Hill a success, I don't. Taxpayers are spending $2.6 million in STAR bonds and carrying debt for that development. If it's not solvent, it wasn't a success, because the goal of those programs is that they're solvent, that we create development, and then it grows and pays itself off. If it's not paying itself off and it's costing us $2.6 million, that's $2.6 million we could have used to fix a root cause or something else in this city.
Okay. Let's move to another issue that most people talk about, and you kind of touched on it already. We've talked about nightlife in Topeka. Even myself, I haven't really found many things to try to do in Topeka. What are your ideas for trying to get more of those types of establishments in Topeka? Because there's a number of people that they cite that as their biggest complaint. What are your thoughts?
An interesting bit of trivia about Topeka is that our noise ordinance applies 24/7 in every part of the city. There is nowhere in Topeka that if you want to take a guitar, a trumpet, and some friends and just go set up on a street at 10 o'clock on a Friday night and play away, you could not potentially have a neighbor file a complaint or somebody come in and shut you down. This is actually something that I've seen happen firsthand with some of the local entertainment scene in town. So as we're talking about creating thriving arts districts and thriving music districts, we have to have a serious conversation about whether or not we exclude downtown and Noto from the noise ordinance maybe till 11:30. Or on weekend nights where we're trying to build that entertainment district, we need to be looking at whether or not we want to allow that organic play to happen. Because if we can't have organic play, then we're never going to be successful. The first thing that I'm going to be looking at is the noise ordinance. The second thing is looking into areas that the city might be able to partner, especially with the creation of the Evergy stage downtown. We're getting an outdoor venue, and an outdoor venue is going to be huge because it helps serve as an anchor point for downtown to help create some of that entertainment. I think that there's a lot of room for growth in the music scene in Topeka, and I think that that's kind of our venue and our in, especially in the young adult population.
All right. And so with the young adult population, and we've talked about the middle and high schoolers. Are you planning to try to do anything at the collegiate level? We have our city university, Washburn.
Yeah.
That's partially funded by taxpayers, but
Yep.
a lot of it's paid for by the students through their loans and such. Are you going to be trying to do anything regarding Washburn and trying to work out a partnership with them? Or what will you be doing on that? Because there's a number of students that might be going to Washburn that might be interested in staying if there was the right climate.
So I've had this idea that I've toyed with. I haven't gone out and researched it yet, which is why I haven't made it a large part of the campaign, because I'm still working on the nuts and bolts on first whether or not it would actually be legal or physically possible. And then secondly, whether or not the city budget would be able to deal with this in the long run. But either this program or something similar in a way. Where we create a City of Topeka and Washburn partnership around tuition, either forgiveness, buyback, or reinforcement, through looking at the impact that having curated that talent and that talent pool in town, developing it here, having those kids work here, maybe for 5 years, and then doing a tuition forgiveness program if you've worked in the nonprofit sector, education sector, been entrepreneurial, something like that, where we could build these classifications and really, really hone in on what the most socially conscious and economically sound sections of the economy are, and have those students go into those areas, incentivize it, have them here working, building careers for 5 years, and then we're going to help you out with your student loans or help you out with your tuition or something like that. I'm not 100% sure on how it would work, what it would look like, or anything like that yet, because it's a lot of reading, and I am buried to my knees in policy research all the time, and so it's on the list, but I got to get there.
Well, we're going to take a pause, and we will also take a pause, and we'll be back shortly after this. Hello, I'm Trey, and this is Top City Today. We're here with Lucas Ryan. He's running for City Council District 6. Lucas?
Hi, Trey.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's been a long day.
It's already?
Oh, yeah, already.
Well, we're going to ask you questions about why you're running for City Council. So let's start out with who you are. Let the people know who you are and where you're from and those
All
types
right.
of things.
Well, I'm Lucas Ryan. I'm from here in Topeka. I grew up at the 501 school system. I went to Williams, Robinson, and Topeka High. My wife and I actually met in a play at Robinson, and we started dating at the end of high school. We moved to Kansas City for a little bit and came back. Got married, bought our house, and now I'm at Washburn. I was a realtor here in town for a little while, and we participated in the top 10 competition. And we've just, ever since we've been back, we've been rolling up our sleeves and doing some work.
All right. So what drove you to go to running for City Council?
I was driven to run for office for a couple reasons, but at the core, through my work around the city, working on the Strengthening Police and Community Partnerships Council and a couple other things, we really dug in on this idea that there are some root causes that we need to fix. And that was part of the program, was finding those root causes and trying to fix them within the police force. And that mentality is something that I think that we could benefit from on the city council. And so I'm running to try to fix some of the root causes of issues and not the symptoms.
All right. Root causes, root issues, name 3 of them. Top 3.
Top 3. We've got the imaging issue in Topeka. We're a very self-deprecating city, and that's not a good thing. We need to be focusing on our youth engagement and our retention, building up the city in a sustainable way. And then finally, our infrastructure, also looking at that sustainability piece. How are we building an infrastructure today that we aren't going to have to be replacing entirely in 10, 15, or 20 years, the way that we're having to pick up the pieces right now?
Okay. What solutions are you proposing for the image issue?
You got 3 hours? Well, for the image issue specifically, just to be brief, one of the biggest things that I want to do is go directly into the high schools and middle schools and use the position of the city council as an ambassador for the city to our youth. Because they get this narrative that their teachers live in Lawrence, that their friends and their family want to be elsewhere, and that there's not a whole lot of good in Topeka. And the speakers that they have are frequently celebrities or from out of the city. So taking that position, taking a little bit of Topeka city government and putting it right in front of them and saying, hey, Topeka cares about you.
There you go. Sustainability. You mentioned youth retention. What does that look like?
So sustainability with youth retention looks like creating a talent pool that's incredible. For a few years now, I've said that Topeka has one of the best uncompensated export economies in the world because we wave wonderful talent and then we wave goodbye as they all go to Chicago and the coasts. So building a talent pool that wants to be here, that enjoys living here and enjoys playing here, so that we can staff positions as our aging workforce starts to move out. We have tons of government, nonprofit, and private sector jobs here that have wonderful benefits and wonderful wages that are about to retire. And if we don't have a talent pool that's ready and educated and willing to live in our city, then we're just going to see more of those positions live in other communities, and the quality of life in Topeka is going to be reduced to a commuter town.
All right. Talk to me more about, we've had other conversations today, and you can find some of those conversations here on our Facebook page after this episode airs. You mentioned an economic slant. What do you mean by economic slant?
It's no secret that the economic activity in Topeka is concentrated on the southwest corner of town. Having an economic slant where all of your economic activity and growth and development happens in one area of the city and the rest of the city is kind of left to fend for itself creates systemic problems. We see tons of correlations and causal relationships to unhappy and unhealthy economic situations, creating negative problems throughout the city. If we help fix some of that, we can build a healthier economy, and it makes it so that it's more sustainable for the growth happening in the Southwest and to build prominent futures for those who live everywhere in Topeka instead of just in one little section.
All right. Crime is a very big topic here in Topeka. Talk to me a little bit about what you want to do to reduce that.
When it comes specifically to crime, I go back a little bit to that economic slant. One of the things that we've seen in research is that when you create strong economic futures and strong civic pride, you see crime rates are reduced because people see the future as a positive. They see going into the workforce, they see engaging with the city in a positive way as something to be desired. So fixing that economic slant is one of the first ways of fixing some of the root causes. Secondly, doubling down on the commitment to community-based policing that we've seen. It costs a little bit more, but it's effective, it's research-backed, and it creates positive relationships between the police department and the community so we don't have bad incidents and we don't have as high of crime rates.
All right. Well, Lucas, thank you very much for coming by today. Wonderful ideas. Thank you very much for watching our program. This has been Lucas Ryan. He's running for City Council District 6. Like I said, you can tune in here on our Facebook page later on to find out more about this conversation that we've had. Until next time, I'm Trey McPherson for Top City Today. Goodbye. The Topeka Rescue Mission is very well talked about in Topeka news. Tell me what you would do or solutions you have to making sure that we don't lose what most people view as a valuable tool and source in helping the homeless in Topeka.
The topic of the Topeka Rescue Mission gets very complicated very quickly. To understand exactly what's going on here, first we have to take just a step back and talk about what it looks like to fund an agency like the Topeka Rescue Mission. So it is a nonprofit. It is a registered 501c3. It's a registered 501c3 that has religious affiliation. Because of that, if they're going to receive any kind of government funding, they have to agree to a certain extra set of rules. Things like non-proselytization, which is just a fancy way of saying that they aren't going to require religious activities or religious curriculum. The Rescue Mission does not do that. They do require those curriculum and they do require those activities. Because of that, it creates this inability for the city to really get involved. The city is able to support nonprofits. They're able to support several through their social service grants program. That was actually something that was just recently talked about over a couple city council meetings. And it's a very emotional time for a lot of the council members, particularly those on the committee, because it's a very hard conversation to say the city has X amount of dollars and this is all we can give to nonprofits and we ran out of the pot. In order to truly deal with homelessness in Topeka, we need to be looking very, very carefully at what programs we're using to try to alleviate those issues. And the Rescue Mission does a lot of very good work. I don't want this to come across as an attack on the mission. I know Barry Feaker cares very, very deeply about the issues and really wants to support the community. But the research is against the practices and the policies of the Rescue Mission. And they are in support of the recent shift that the city has made towards housing first policies. And housing first policies are the idea that you just put individuals who have found themselves homeless into housing. No conditions, no strings, no nothing. You find a house, you find living a facility, and you take the homeless individual, you give them access to that, you surround those locations with services, access to services for mental health, access to services for financial burdens, things like that, and you build those services around it, but you make it optional. And the research proves that this is the most effective and the most cost-efficient way to deal with homelessness. Unfortunately, the structure of the mission right now does not allow for that program. And while I would hate to see the mission go away, I don't want the mission to go away. There is a very strong need for homelessness resources in the community. The issues that the mission is having with their budget are something that the city is unable to get involved in and unable to help with unless they very seriously restructure their ability to receive government money, which is their own decision, and the policies that they're using. Because when looking at the research, I cannot in good faith say that it's good investment of tax dollars to go towards policies that are not research-backed towards fixing this issue. Because we need to fix this issue, and we need to provide adequate, affordable housing and housing first programs to help these people before they've gone a year, before their families have developed trauma and their children have experienced that. We need to be investing in research-backed, efficient solutions. And as hard as that sounds, it's one of the decisions that we have to be willing to make. And as members of the council, we have a responsibility to be custodians of the city and custodians of tax dollars. And from those frameworks, the city cannot help the mission in its current system. We would have to be exploring an alternative. And it's a hard conversation, but it's one that I'm willing to have.
Okay. We're kind of changing gears, but in a similar vein, is there any part of the city budget or any sort of program that you identify as maybe being inefficient or wasteful? And what would you do to supplement that or make it useful or put in a different program?
So the first thing I want to say to that is time management of the council. If you've ever been to a council meeting, sometimes the questions about where we are in Robert's Rules of Order, it's ridiculous. We need to just deal with some just basic governance. I have sat there for an hour while we tried to figure out where we were in the point of order, and as just a layperson sitting on the floor, I could not speak up and say where it was, but it's a basic governing body. It's a basic motion system, and having that hour is city manager there, having city attorney there, having paid staff there running the video audio system. That's a lot of waste of taxpayer dollars while the governing body should be governing, and instead they're trying to figure out just where they are in precedent. So that's just a personal pet peeve of mine, but that's because my debate coach Pam McComas used to have all kinds of wonderful talks about precedents and how those systems worked with me. To be a little bit more serious about funding, I think that one of the biggest areas that we see waste is in our infrastructure. We are spending a lot of money on infrastructure, and while that money is well-deserved, and we do need to be conducting street repair, and we do need to be going out and fixing these things, we're fixing them in an inefficient way. It goes back to that piece of sustainability and back to that piece of making sure that we're incorporating new research. We aren't necessarily building roads that we're not going to have to be fixing in 5 years, 10 years, 16. I mean, who drove down 17th last winter? Those potholes, I heard them called zombie potholes all over campus. And that's because we would fix them, and 2 weeks later, they would be just as bad, if not worse. And so implementing infrastructure changes to make it so that our infrastructure is sustainable, it might cost a little bit more up front, but it cuts so much in maintenance and it costs so much in long-term costs that our biggest waste is in not creating good maintenance programs. It's by using deferred maintenance. That's it.
Great.